trained the food trainer program. We train doctors and nurses from across the world. So as you heard from our dean, we have done programs in South America, we have done programs in Africa, we have done programs everywhere. India is the only country where it was not held so far. So before I give my presidency to my good friend from Africa, I thought we should do it in India. Next slide. So we have, as you heard from our dean, the faculty from the United States and Brazil, where we have Dr. Amputation, who is our Vice President. Belgium, we have a Vice President Finance. And we have from Canada, Dr. Marian Botros, who is our Vice President. And we have Dr. Vijay Viswanathan from Malaysia. But we have our President-elect, Dr. Abbas from Tanzania, Dar es Salaam. And we have doctors who have also joined the Indian doctors from Maldives, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, these countries, and Maldives also. So these countries have also joined Indian doctors, and we had about 80 doctors and nurses from these countries in the last 2 days. Today is the third day, and tomorrow is the final day. And next slide. We are a sister concern of what is called the IWGDF. The IWGDF is the International Working Group on Diabetic Food. It's based in Netherlands. We are based in Belgium. And we are supposed to implement the guidelines which the IWGDF writes. The IWGDF has got guidelines on peripheral artery disease, on high-risk feed prevention, on infection, wound healing, and so on. It's brought out every 4 years. It's a evidence-based guideline, and we follow it across the world. And our duty as the DFood International implementation arm is to implement whatever the IWGDF panel of experts. We have 50 countries from where the IWGDF writes guidelines. So I would like all of you to read these guidelines, which a lot of hard work goes into it. And it's called iwgdfguidelines.org. The last guidelines was published in 2019. The next guidelines will be published in 2023 this year on May 13 in Netherlands. Next slide.
For giving me this distinct honor to be the recipient of this gold Oration medal in such a momentous year, celebrating the 100 years of Professor Viswanathan celebration. And I will start also by giving you a perspective on a complication of diabetes. As very kindly the organizer had mentioned, I have worked a lot in the field of complications, and more recently I have had the distinct honor to lead the cardiovascular interest group of the American Diabetes Association and started to understand the impact of heart failure in diabetes, which will be the focus of this oration. Again, I'd like to start by saying that it's my first time in India, and yesterday I had the opportunity to visit the hospital of Dr. Vijay and also attend some of this workshop on the foot. And I was impressed about the hospital. To try to understand the magnitude of this complication and what is the evidence there, and what we have learned in the last several decades on diagnosing as early as possible. And with that, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the epidemiology and what is the current state. I mean, what is happening today in people with diabetes worldwide as far as heart goes. Very briefly, I will discuss mechanism, but then I will spend the most important time on how we diagnose in our practice. What are the tools and what can we do to help these patients? Dr. Eva has shown you earlier that indeed, unfortunately, the prevalence of diabetes worldwide has for many years already reached these epidemic proportions. Unfortunately, the numbers continue to rise. Despite our efforts in many countries, including here in India, through the diabetes prevention, we haven't been very effective yet, and that is absolutely true here in India through the very nice studies that Dr. Mohan had published a few years ago. And definitely, the burden of diabetes is, as I said, a critical component of the cause of mortality. And as you can see here, in just a decade, diabetes has leaped as now the 10th cause of mortality across all chronic conditions worldwide. In the US, of course, the slopes continue to rise as well for both diagnosed and undiagnosed and diagnosed diabetes and pre-diabetes. We are much better in diagnosing as here in yellow, but unfortunately these numbers are going up, and with more than 37 millions, definitely endocrinologists and cardiologists are outnumbered. Hence, how important it is to have all primary physicians and all clinicians who provide care to people with diabetes educated to know exactly what to do. And the costs are non-sustainable. And these costs are definitely associated to these multiple complications that, as you can see here, can affect the entire human bodies. Now, again, I think that all complications are very important, but let's be realistic. For many years, the cardiovascular disease had been center stage in diabetes. It's probably the most sexy complication. It's also the one that definitely is associated with a high risk of mortality. And here are some data that have been published, the evidence from multiple very well phenotypes cohorts. And again, Dr. Callahan has mentioned about registries earlier this morning. Swedish are among the top leaders in clearly maintaining very accurate records of the entire population. And as shown here, when we looked at cardiovascular outcomes in people with type 2 diabetes in this slide, compared with the general population, given all the progress that we have made in treating cholesterol and hypertension, the major cardiovascular outcomes are decreasing much more in the general population compared to diabetes. Unfortunately, what we also see in the US is that although these trends were going down up until 2010, when we look here in these slides, that actually shows cardiovascular kidney amputation and stroke and end-stage renal disease, we see now a very worrisome uptrend starting from 2012 to 2015, particularly in the younger people, which has an additional prognostic implication as these people have a much longer expectancy of life. So what do we know about heart failure? I'm not going to bore you with so much epidemiology. Enough is to say that in our consensus, which is free for everybody in the world, we were having the opportunity to systematically analyze very large cohorts and understand exactly what is the impact of diabetes and heart failure in both people with type 1, type 2, and pre-diabetes. And here are just some of these Framingham and hence the Scottish and the Swedish registry. Let me show you something else which is quite intriguing, is that when people have both this heart and kidney dysfunction, chronic kidney disease and heart failure shown here in this blue line, the risks associated with this combination are exponentially higher compared with the traditional atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. And this is data from 6 countries, 5 European countries and Japan, clearly showing the same very worrisome trend. And when one has diabetes, and heart failure, including earlier stages that we will talk about in a few minutes, at every level of additional risk factors such as hypertension or atherosclerotic heart disease, the risk of hospitalization, which means the stage C and the much higher stages, increases by 30 to 40%. And then again, because we are here in Chennai, there is some recent data that your own Dr. Vijay had published demonstrating in this cohort in South India the impact of heart failure and some of the phenotypic characteristics of the participants that he had studied, and I'm sure he will continue to study. I like also to say that during this work that was done as a team, we were absolutely stunned to find that in reality, and by definition, it was always assumed that the risk of cardiovascular complication, including heart failure, are much higher in people with type 2 diabetes. And you've heard from Eva regarding this additional risk factor, obesity, hypertension. But in reality, through these excellent data sets that the Scottish had that have been actually following their entire populations for many, many years, as seen here in green, for both men and women. In fact, the risk of developing heart failure is much higher in people with type 1 than type 2 diabetes. And that actually raises additional problems for us at the American Diabetes Association, because the type 1 population have been neglected when it comes to drug development, as all these large trials that have led to us having such important tools have only involved people with type 2 diabetes. And what is actually even more striking, as seen here on the right, is that this risk is even higher in the women. We know that women, both with type 2 and type 1 diabetes, have higher risk than men of developing heart failure, as shown here, after controlling their age, and that is even higher in women with type 1 diabetes. Let's look here with diabetes who have either heart failure or not. And as you can see here, with incident heart failure, the 5-year survival rate are less than 25%. And similar high mortality has been evidentiated in a couple of other large trials that I'm sure that you are familiar. Those are trials that led to the evidence behind RAS inhibitors in cardiovascular risk reduction, like PLAG and RANAL, the same very, very high risk. And very recently, as published in JACC, in the Journal of American College of Cardiology, last year, we also learned that with diabetes, and especially when A1C is above 75, the age in which people are diagnosed with these earlier stages of heart failure, it's much younger, as seen here. And that was a community study that is well known in most the atherosclerosis risk in community or RA. So let's talk about some mechanism, and again, I'm only going to show you a couple of slides here. There is a lot of in heart failure as it is in neuropathy, particularly diabetes, stepwise exercise, weight loss, and what is also very important, the social determinants of health. It is clear, and we have evidence now, that having a lower socioeconomic status increases the risk of all complications, including heart failure. And among the most important social determinants of health that we have highlighted as playing a role in heart failure, health literacy, access to housing and food, and the safe environment are emerging as some of the leading ones. And here is actually also the algorithm that demonstrates that, as it is true for all diabetes management, the physician is just one piece. We need to work as a team. The primary diabetes clinician, whether it's primary care physician, endocrinologist, family physician, cannot do it alone. We need to work together with our nurses, diabetes educators, and our colleagues in nephrology, cardiology, social workers, here for each of these stage, we highlight the most essential steps. Once again, in order to make an impact in patient life, we need to diagnose the disease early, because now we have a lot of tools to stop it in a stage A or B, which we didn't have actually 10 years ago. And educating both the clinicians and the patients and their family and the health system and the insurance company, it's not easy, but that's why we have embarked in this journey, and we are not going to give up. And with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your attention, and again, highlight the work of my colleagues, particularly my Vice Chair, Professor Jim Januzzi from Harvard, and all the rest of the team of endocrinologists, cardiologists, eminent care physicians, and the American Diabetes Association and the American College of Cardiology, who have definitely supported and made this possible. Thank you very much for your attention.